Hey, this is Kez.
And Will.
And this is Nightmares at Midnight. Welcome back to episode 19 of Nightmares at Midnight. I'm Kez, and my husband is here with me. We're going to be doing the Leviathan today for our episode. We are finishing up our Sea Creatures series. I'm thinking maybe this one and one more. I might cover the Capricorn just because it's part goat. I'm going to give you my spiel here quick, the typical one in the beginning, and then we're going to jump right into it. Make sure you're listening to us on our website, nightmaresatmidnightpodcast.buzzsprout.com, or you can listen to us on Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, Podcast Index, TuneIn Plus Alexa, Podcast Addict, and iHeartRadio. Don't forget to jump over to patreon.com/nightmaresatmidnightpodcast and join one of our groups. Help support our podcast, and you get extras. You get one-on-one time with us. You get to watch us record the podcast. You just get a bunch of extra stuff, and it helps support us. You can also follow us on Instagram at Nightmares at Midnight Podcast and Facebook, which is Nightmares at Midnight Podcast, where you can see where I post pictures about what's going to be happening the next week. I also get suggestions on there of which episodes to do. And real quick, before we jump into the Leviathan, I haven't been doing the what we're watching for the last handful of episodes now, but special exception, I have got to mention the new Stephen King movie that's coming out in June. June 2nd is when it comes into theaters, and it's The Boogeyman. It's a movie adaptation of his short story about the Boogeyman, and I just can't wait to see it. So that's all. That's all I wanted to say. Will is going to be leading this episode again. We are going to try to stay non-biased about the religious aspect of this episode. If you are 100% not willing to listen to this episode because it has talk of religion, go ahead and just skip on to the next episode for next week. But we are, like I said, going to try and stay non-biased and not voice our opinions about whether religious beliefs are real or not. That being said, go ahead.
Okay, so the Leviathan, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a sea monster defeated by Yahweh in various scriptural accounts. It is also defined as a large sea animal or something large or formidable. So getting into the description and attributes, the best encompassing description that I was able to find in relatively plain English is actually from the New International Version of the Christian Bible. So as I read this, if your Bible is worded a little bit different, it's because there are multiple translations of the original text. Some people prefer to read it in the older version, which is thous and these. I preferred to reading through it in a little more common or basic English. So if your version is different, that's okay. It comes from Job chapter 41, verses 12 through 34. This section is basically God describing the Leviathan to Job. So if you can just imagine, I have a deep, soothing James Earl Jones voice for this portion. It'll come across so much better. Name a more soothing voice than James Earl Jones.
Morgan Freeman.
I feel like Morgan Freeman's is still a little high.
I could listen to Morgan Freeman read me bedtime stories all the time.
I agree, but I feel James Earl Jones has a little more bass, so it resonates the way you would, at least I would think, that some, almighty being would sound. Very deep.
Are you kidding me? Morgan Freeman was literally God.
So was Whoopi Goldberg.
Well?
Yeah, in the Muppet movie.
No, nobody watches that.
I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares to open the door of its mouth ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined so fast to one another, they cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of a dawn. Flames steam from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burned reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and the flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. Its chest is hard as rock, hard as a lower millstone. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Sling stones are like chaff to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattle of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. It's kind of terrifying.
It reminds me of the dragon in Lord of the
Shrek?
Rings.
Oh.
Lord of the Rings. Jeez.
Smog.
Yeah, it reminds me of that.
So that is one of the things. It is commonly depicted and thought of as a sea serpent, but when you read through that description, it definitely comes across as something dragon, or the other one is actually people thought it sounded kind of like a crocodile. Because in the part of the world where this story or this creature would have originated, they would have crocodiles. So that's one of the theories, is that this is an amplified crocodile. Oh, by the way, it has, fire breath.
So it's also in the book of Revelation. I don't know if you saw this while you were researching, where God is fighting a Leviathan, or in reference, a seven-headed dragon, which is symbolic of the devil. And during this conflict, there was two monsters summoned that sided with the dragon. The first was from the abyss, and the second was from the earth. And chapter 13 in Revelations describes the first beast from rising from the sea, hence the relation to the Leviathan.
I did not read the book of Revelation's accounts of this, but with the one that comes from the earth, do you know if that's the behemoth?
Yeah, and then there's also the Ziz, too.
Okay.
And the trifecta.
In Job, in a couple chapters before 41, God does a very big description of what the behemoth is. So they're both referenced in Job. I don't know if the Ziz is or not. I wasn't looking for that. But yes, the behemoth was guessed to be possibly a hippopotamus. Because it lived in the marsh, and so it spent time in the water, but also on the land.
Well, from what I had researched, was that the behemoth was strictly a land one.
Okay.
And that God made them separate, so that way they couldn't be together.
Okay.
So one couldn't cross over onto the other.
Okay.
And when they did, that was when he had to fight, like that signaled the end times.
Intervene. Okay. Interesting. Going back to Leviathan, the later interpretations of Leviathan described it as a large aquatic creature, such as a crocodile, like I said. Also, great whales. It eventually came to just be monsters of the sea in general. That's how it's used now, not originally.
See, when I think of Leviathan, I think of like a dragon head, but snake-like body. Like with spikes along its back, but no legs or arms. Like it's literally like a snake from the back of the head down to its tail.
Okay.
And really long.
Okay.
Because in maps, like pirate maps from when we were kids, Leviathans were almost like where you couldn't see all of their whole body because parts went up and down into the water and out of the water.
Okay.
So to me, that's what I think of when I don't think of anything with legs or arms, and I don't think of, crocodile or hippos. I 100% think snake.
Okay. I think the first line, so verse 12, where it says, I will not speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength, and its graceful form. Or I will not fail to speak. That word, I will not speak of Leviathan's limbs, to me means he has to have some kind of arms or legs. Otherwise, why would God feel the need to mention them?
Do you know there's a dinosaur the Loch Ness got confused with that had like arms and legs, but they look kind of fin-like? It starts with a P, like most dinosaurs, but... do you know what I'm talking about?
I know the one you're talking about. I cannot think of the name. But yeah, it's basically like a brontosaurus, but with fins instead of proper legs. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that, when I was researching, that was one that got brought up, was that it could potentially have been confused with that to make it very real life.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. I mean, because I haven't seen a skeleton on one of those, but I feel like...
Oh, are we crossing into the scene things again? You have to see it to believe it situation?
No, I'm just saying that I would think the skeleton of that dinosaur that is the source of potentially Loch Ness monsters, that rib cage is going to be big and rounded, a lot like a brontosaurus is.
Right. It was.
Okay. As opposed to long and lean.
Like a snake.
But snakes don't have fins. So
Listen.
even if we're saying that a Leviathan is a long, thin type creature, which a lot of the depictions of it are, a lot of the depictions draw it as, yes, like a basically big, scary sea serpent. Mm-hmm. But they lack any kind of fin, flipper, leg.
Are all the other depictions of this, other than Job 42:12, or any of the other ones, saying that they have limbs?
Yes. I did look at a few different versions of the translations from different editions of the Bible. And that first line, from the ones I recall, pretty much always referenced limbs, strength, and the graceful form. Or something about the general shape of it.
Okay. Well, I looked into the whale part of it. The Leviathan, so Livyatan instead of Leviathan, is an extinct genus of macroraptorial sperm whale containing one known species, which is Melville. Which one's right?
Melville, because it's named after the author, Herman Melville.
But it's not spelled the same. Melville.
That's the Latin way to spell it.
The genus name was inspired by the biblical sea monster, the Leviathan, and the species name by Herman Melville, the author of the famous novel Moby Dick, about a white bull sperm whale. It was a member of macroraptorial sperm whales, or raptorial sperm whales, and was probably an apex predator preying on whales, seals, and so forth. Characteristically, a raptorial sperm whale, the Leviathan, had functional enamel-coated teeth on the upper and lower jaws, as well as several features suitable for hunting large prey. This is where things get a bit stretched, I think. The body length of the Leviathan is unknown, since only the hollow-type skull is preserved. I can't remember. It's overseas somewhere that they have it in a museum. They have a skull of what they think is the Leviathan. And I think I posted it in Instagram and on Facebook so you guys can see it. That it looks like it has a long snout, bill, nose, with big sharp teeth on the top and bottom. So it does kind of look almost alligator-esque type. Mm-hmm. And the difference, though, was that the top of the head looked different than an alligator. Like it wasn't all flat like an alligator's skull kind of is. This one, like it dipped up more, as if it held more of a bigger brain than what an alligator has.
Okay. I saw some pictures of it as well, and then some artistic recreations of what they think it may have looked like. And I agree, it almost looks like if you took the general profile of a traditional sperm whale, where they have that kind of like squared off nose, and then gave it a little bit of like a beluga whale bulge on the front, and then stretched the whole thing out.
Right. Where the skull is at the museum there, I'm going to have to figure out where that's at. Where the skull is being held, the colleagues there estimated the body length of the Leviathan using what they call a zygophyseter and a modern sperm whale as a guide. And they thought that the length would be estimated to be about 44 to 57 feet long. So similar to that of a modern sperm whale, making it one of the largest predators known to have existed. And the teeth, which are still in the skull, the teeth measured to be about 1.2 feet from the gums to the tip of the tooth, and are the largest biting teeth of any known animal, excluding tusks. It is distinguished from the other raptorial sperm whales by the basin on the skull spanning the length of the snout. So it's different than normal sperm whales.
Right, because of that extra bulge.
Right. But it's confusing to me because I tried to imagine when I saw the picture of the skull, I tried to imagine it having a head like what I had previously mentioned, where it kind of had a dragon head. And so it was hard for me to picture with that spot on its head to look like that.
Right.
So I was all sorts of confused at this point, because to me, mythological Leviathan is different than what the skull that they have looks like.
Yeah, I don't think when people hear the word Leviathan, if they don't know of this raptorial sperm whale, I don't think they go to, hey, a big whale with scary teeth. I think they go more to the, sea snake dragon type
Right, sea serpent,
image.
yeah.
Right. Little fun fact about that name and why it's spelled slightly different is that is the original Hebrew spelling of the word Leviathan, because when they first named it Leviathan Melville, there was a issue in the naming convention because the word Leviathan, spelled the same way as this sea creature we're talking about, is already designating the mammoth or mastodon. So they were like, oh, we're already using that word for a creature. We need to change it. So they went with the older Hebrew spelling of the word.
Is it spelled different in different versions of the Bible? You know what I mean? Like, is it Leviathan in each version, or is it Leviathan in one?
No, because all of the translations I read were in English. So if you were reading the Jewish Bible or a Christian Bible in
A different language?
I don't want to say whatever language. Hebrew. If you were reading a Christian Bible in Hebrew or the Jewish Bible, which is in Hebrew mostly, it's probably going to have the other spelling. But since this is how it's spelled, Leviathan, in English, all of the Bible translations I saw were the same spelling.
Okay.
Fun facts about the more sea serpent type. It's kind of a reoccurring creature across multiple religions. The oldest one is said that it is a reflection of the older Canaanite or Mesopotamian Lotan, which was a big sea serpent type creature in their belief system. that held kind of the same role. There's also a Tiamat from Mesopotamia. The Hindus have Varithra, and then there's the potentially more known Norse Jormungandr, or the Midgard serpent, or the world serpent. All of these serpents play kind of that same role across all these religions. There's usually some kind of cycle where the god or a god from their beliefs have to fight this serpent at some point or another. Sometimes it's the end of the world. Sometimes it's periodically throughout time to keep something from happening or forcing something to happen.
I think it was the Greek version of this was that the Leviathan was or mated with one of the gods, and that's how the cosmos came about. Was their kids were the cosmos? Did you read that?
I didn't read the Greek one, but yep, sometimes it is fighting the Leviathan to create like the sea. Sometimes it is fighting the Leviathan to end the world or to prevent the end of the world. There's actually a speculation that the Leviathan is mentioned in Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible or the Jewish Bible or the Torah, where when God is creating the sea and the land and he makes all of the monsters of the sea, that one of the, or all of the creatures of the sea, one of the words that is used is connected to the Leviathan. So basically,
I have to read through Genesis again because I don't remember that. I guess it might depend on what version too, because I was raised on the King James version.
yeah, so different points inside of the Christian Bible, Jewish Bible, Torah, again, depending on which version. They're all intermingled, correlated. It is mentioned in Psalms. Obviously, the book of Job, we read a good chunk of that chapter that it talks about him. The book of Isaiah, the book of Amos, the book of Enoch, and then some of the translations included a mention in Genesis, like I said.
What is the book of Amos, the book of Enoch? What is that? Those are books in the Bible? Those aren't books in the Bible.
The Jewish Bible.
Oh.
There's the Torah, which are the first 5 books of the Christian Bible, from my understanding and the way I remember it from being, brought up in the church, are identical. And then a lot of the Old Testament is same, but there's some things that the Jewish people have that are, or the Jewish beliefs have, that are added kind of after the fact. Stories added by rabbis, like very old rabbis though, not modern day.
Does the Catholic Bible have talk of Leviathan?
The Catholic Bible would arguably be the original version of the Bible. So, yes.
So where on the map did this originate? Where? For those geography buffs out there like you, where did the Leviathan story originate?
The oldest record of it was the Canaanites and the Lotan.
So where is that on the map?
Mediterranean.
So when you're talking about location of where this originated, you're talking about in between, so you said the Mediterranean, so that means Mediterranean Sea, which means in between Spain and France and Italy and Greece and Turkey and Egypt and Algeria and that area but that's where it originated from in the Bible.
More specifically, it would have been kind of that in between Egypt and Turkey coastline.
Okay.
Because that's kind of where Judaism finds its roots.
With pharaohs and stuff of Egypt and
Israel's there now, which it wasn't a thing before World War II, but yes, Jordan.
My mom went there.
I know she did.
That's super cool. I'm so jealous.
Well, there's other locations depending on which version, because obviously with the Norse and the Midgard serpent, it encompasses around the world, keeping the water in. So it surrounds everything, which kind of makes me think it supports the whole flat Earth theory.
I was just thinking that. I was trying to not ask you, but I was thinking, at that time, did people still believe that the Earth was flat?
The Norse? I would think so. At least some of them.
I don't understand that train of thought. You're just going to fall off it? I guess because they didn't have science and gravity and stuff at that point. But
I mean, gravity was known about, but the flat Earth concept is instead of everything being pulled down to the ground, it's actually that the entire Earth is moving up at 9.8 meters a second, which just so happens to be the same acceleration rate of things that, air quotes, fall due to gravity. So it's not you are being pulled back down, it's that the ground is coming up to meet you.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the Hindus with Varatra, obviously that's not going to be in the Mediterranean. That's going to be over by India somewhere. I did not spend a lot of time diving deep into that history, but like the countries of Cana and Mesopotamia had some overlap, kind of similar locations in that. What some people call the Near East of Asia or the Middle East. So, going into merchandise, there are a few figurines you can find on Etsy. There's also a mention of the Leviathan in Dungeons and Dragons, so you're probably going to see some statues and figurines showing up in relation to that. Fun fact for you, there is an entire creature type in Magic the Gathering that are Leviathans.
Did you just say fun fact for me like I don't know?
They vary in depiction between something like a crocodile to something like a sea snake. And the oldest one I remember seeing, and from looking them up, it actually looks kind of like a cloudy whale that's under the water. It was real weird. It's a big scary 10-10 that you have to sacrifice islands to untap and sacrifice islands to attack with. But yeah, your inner nerd is showing. But I
was
love
just
you.
going to say your inner nerd is showing.
There are shirts on Redbubble, Etsy, TeePublic. If you are looking for merchandise, just want to give you a heads up that the heavy metal group Mastodon had a song, and I think potentially the whole album was called Leviathan. So you're probably going to run across Mastodon shirts that have a reference or are coming up as search results. You also run the risk of coming across the Leviathan Cross, which is part of the satanic belief system. But that will be a result that pops up if you look for just merchandise, because it does contain the word Leviathan. Movies. There was only one movie that I found that talked about Leviathans, or was titled Leviathan, that dealt with actual sea creatures. It was from 1989. It was about a group of Russian deep-sea miners, and they end up facing a failed genetic experiment under the water. There are some other movies out there, but they don't deal with the sea creature itself.
Before we talk about if we think it's real or not, while I was researching, something that I thought was interesting while looking for facts about it is that there is a pirate group that is called the Crew of the Leviathan, and it originates out of Daytona Beach, Florida, but they are all over the U.S., except for Alaska. That was the only state. Oh, and I think Arkansas. There was only like 3 or 4 states that didn't have these people in them. And
there's not a lot of oceanfront property for pirates in Arkansas.
I mean, I understand that, but there's also not in Nebraska or Iowa, and there's people there. They are all over, and they go to Renaissance and medieval fairs and Comic-Cons and Fantasy Fests, steampunk type events. They basically band together to go get drunk dressed as pirates. Like, they 100% do it up. They actually have their own symbol, and it's very much so, if you know the Harry Potter Death Eater symbol, it's very similar to that, except for the forehead of the skull is the Leviathan, like wrapped around on their skull. Like, that's their symbol.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I bet if you reached out to them and told them that you gave them a free shout out on your podcast so they should come up to Arcticon,
that would be cool.
they might. And then point out, like, reach out to the Daytona Beach, Florida one specifically, and be like, hey, not sure if you know this, but there's a Comic-Con or the Ren Fair, or
Scottish Highland Games.
Highland Games. Have them come up for Highland Games.
Yeah. They actually have a very lengthy process to be able to get into their crew.
Okay.
And it's like you have to prove yourself
a pirate.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I was very detailing reading this.
Sailing, pillaging, and plundering all across the open seas.
Kansas.
All across Kansas, right?
But no, it was very interesting actually to read it. But I would definitely be interested in reaching out because we have oceanfront property here.
We have the most coastline of any state out there.
Yeah.
And all the little islands. You have any idea how easy it would be to hide buried treasure or bodies in Alaska?
Okay, let's tame her down there, Ed. Okay. So, fun fact about Ed.
He was a Russian arms dealer.
And legs.
Thanks, Grandma Bev.
Thanks, Terry. Anyways, another thing I read too is that because we always look up alcohol. I don't know why we got into that routine, but we always do.
The Krampus one. The first one I was on.
Was that the first one that we did? I don't feel like that was the first one I looked up alcohol on.
That was the first one I was on, and I don't remember hearing anything about alcohol until... Because I'm the bad influence.
You are the bad influence. I don't drink. Anyways, there is a red wine that's based out of California called the Leviathan. And it focuses, quote, on dried berry, currant, and dill, where it complements dried herb and cedar reverberate, giving a nice finish. 14.5% alcohol content.
That thing's 29 proof for a wine. That's
gnarly.
That's heavy.
Yes.
I like it.
But the label was very deceiving because to me it kind of came across almost like a kraken, like it looked like it had more legs than it did.
Some more squid-like, not snake or whale.
Yeah. And then there's a brewery called the Harpoon Brewery, and they make an imperial IPA called Harpoon Leviathan. That one was very much Leviathan-like. And it has a very sweet malt backbone to balance the American hops intensity. So if you're a beer person, this is the one for you because it mentioned like 5 or 6 different types of hops that went into this beer. So I was just like, wow, that's a lot. There's also an aftershave splash called Leviathan. You're welcome. You want to be mythological while you shave? I got you covered. You can turn into a Norse god. No, they didn't shave, I guess.
No. Just their heads. Only on the sides.
Some of them. I don't know. Thor's got pretty luscious locks. Okay, so what do we think? Is it real or not?
That actually brought up a interesting debate that I read inside of at least a Christian group. There are some people that are of the thought of God says this thing exists. He is infallible. It must be real. Or at one time was real. There are other people that take the standpoint of God explained this creature to demonstrate how powerful God himself is because he created this Leviathan and it is a subject of God.
Right, so a metaphor.
Sure, we'll call it a metaphor. Do I think the big scary sea serpent is real?
Like talked about in Job?
Part of me really hopes not, because that thing is terrifying to think about.
When you just said that, it made me think about I was watching YouTube videos on this, and one of the descriptions is that this thing is 300 miles long. Did you see that?
I didn't watch any of the YouTube videos about it. For description, I pretty much stuck with Job, because like I said, it was the best single place I found listing out like the characteristics of it. The detail of it, right. So 300 miles... for a Leviathan versus the Midgard serpent, which is supposed to wrap all the way around the world, 300 miles wouldn't really be that big. That'd be a pretty small world.
Right.
So...
well, I mean, when you're Norse, in that time era, you don't know how big the world is. So, and you think it's flat. So...
well, they discovered like the Canada, North America from their area. So they made it all the way past Iceland, Greenland, across the Atlantic Ocean. So maybe not when the Norse belief started, but the Vikings definitely made it all the way over here, and they made it down into the Mediterranean. Now we're hanging out in, modern day Turkey. So they traveled a fair amount. A lot more than a lot of people give them credit for.
I also saw on these YouTube videos, because I frequently watch these, and I don't know why I get sucked into them, but I do.
Because YouTube is a rabbit hole.
Yes.
It's a black hole that sucks you in and will never let you go.
Anyways, I was watching these YouTube videos, and I always watch them that what is caught on Google Earth images.
Mm-hmm.
Have you watched any of those before?
No.
So
but you were telling me there's the one
with the Kraken.
With the Kraken.
Yep, I saw that one again today.
Deception Point.
Deception Island.
Deception Island. I'm sorry. Very ironically named that there would be a Kraken off of it.
Today there was one. I don't remember where it was located, but they had a Google image of it, and it was like really long, and they were explaining that it couldn't possibly have been like a whale or a boat because it makes like a 90-degree turn and keeps going in the image. And there's no like white, like boats kick up the white.
The wake.
Yeah. It wasn't like that. And it was like a long dark shadow underneath. So it kind of looked like a snake had made that and like the tail was still in the curve. I was just thinking like, I literally never want to go in the water again after doing this podcast. Because there's so much undiscovered space in the water that we have no idea what's in there.
Crazy idea. What if it was 3 whales that just happened to be aligned in like the...
They were playing follow the leader?
I mean...
You're ridiculous.
So going back, do I think the big sea serpent one is real? Probably not. The whale that we have the skull of, I mean... Clearly, there's some evidence of something like that. How big it actually was, I don't know. Could it have been the head or the skull is 80% of the body, so it just had a really short, tail behind it? Or could it have been, even bigger than the record sperm whale that we've discovered? Maybe. I don't know.
I think it's real.
You think so?
I don't know necessarily that it's still alive. But I think that it did exist at one point not because of any religious nothing, but because maps from that time, like so long ago, pirates and, all that kind of thing.
Here be dragons, yeah.
They have these serpents. And I feel like if people are out there in ships... and they see these things, and they're writing them down on maps. Like, they weren't myths at the time. They're myths now because of how long ago they were. So, who's to say that they weren't real at that time? Or some version of it.
Okay.
I
mean, using the same kind of logic that you had in your mermaid one of stuff might look like something a ways away, but once you get up close to it, it's not that at all.
Oh, right. I mean, yes, that's a thing, but it's not one person that viewed it. It's a bunch of different people viewed it and put it on their maps or told stories about it or whatever.
Right, but isn't that the whole kind of idea of the old cryptids is it started as a single story and then it evolved into like just the story that continuously gets told generation after generation by more and more people?
I'm sorry, you're a see it to believe it kind of person.
I'm just saying.
I think it was real at some point, yes.
Did it breathe fire?
No, I don't believe that. I don't know how it could breathe fire and be in the water at the same time. That science does not make sense to me.
I mean, underwater welding. They use fire underwater there.
Fair, okay.
And 1/3 of water is flammable.
I still think it was real at some point. Some version of it was.
Okay.
Whether it was the serpent or whether it was more alligator-like, I think it was real.
Okay.
I do want to say, though, that with the divided concept of Christianity, where it's either real creature that God created or metaphorical, I would think that it would be metaphorical. But what is the talk about in Revelations then, where he has to fight the 7-headed dragon? You know what I mean? Like this, we're getting into very Hercules Greek belief systems there.
Well, like the Hydra.
Yeah, this is a very interesting territory for me with this one because of the religious beliefs of how I was brought up that the Bible is 100% factual. So to read Revelations and read what happens, to me, it's like that crosses into that Greek territory, and those are considered myths. You know, Hercules and
Right.
that type of thing. So why is Revelations writings real? And the gods, Greek gods, are not real.
Because the Greek gods didn't believe the same thing that the Christian people that brought you up believed. You can make the same argument about why are any of the stories from Hinduism not real? Like, why isn't, the world going to be destroyed by Vishnu and then recreated? I think it's Vishnu. It's been a while since I've studied Hinduism.
Well, that's the Leviathan, folks. No, but to wrap this one up a little bit, this one was an interesting one for us to do for the sea creatures, because normally for the podcast we stick to cryptids and mythological creatures and scary stories, and this one was hard because it did cross into the religion territory, and I typically try to avoid religion and politics on the podcast because people are so divided. And this one was a tough one for me because I was taught one way, and what I believe as an adult differs from that a little bit. So to satisfy my inner child and what I was taught, it's a metaphor, and God's strength is what is being talked about. But then to satisfy my adult beliefs is that it very much so is real, right along with all the Greek gods and right along with all the Norse paganism. But who knows, really? At this point, for me, religion is something that gets you through the fact that you're going to die, not necessarily what's real or not.
You got really heavy this episode.
I'm so sorry. I did. But this one got me there. And it's interesting that it took the Leviathan to get there. But yes, I think the pirate map Leviathan is the real version of this serpent without legs. And that's where my beliefs are at.
So what would be the difference between a sea serpent and a sea dragon?
Well, the dragon would have legs.
But it's in the sea.
The dragon totes fire. I don't know. Where did the sea dragon come from?
Well, because there was a specific painting that I saw from, I'm guessing it was a German painter by the name or somewhere in that Bavaria type area, where the Leviathan has wings, but it's in the water.
And that's the Ziz. Yeah. So the Ziz is like the trifecta, where the behemoth is on land and the Leviathan is in the water, and then the Ziz is in the air.
But the painting is of the Leviathan being defeated? The Destruction of Leviathan by Gustav Dorp. Drawn, maybe? It might not be a painting. It might be a drawing. In 1865.
So that one, it does have wings.
It very much looks
that
dragon-like.
100% looks like what Revelations is talking about, where God defeats it. Because in this drawing is a serpent-like creature, kind of like what I was talking about, with the spines on the back and the dragon-type head, but it has wings, kind of close up to its head a little bit. So that's interesting. I don't know. I don't think that the Leviathan should have wings. Like, that to me in my mind doesn't. That's a dragon. That's not a Leviathan.
Okay, so then my question is, how many legs does a dragon have?
4.
4.
Regardless of their big head and little arms type dragon, or if it's all 4 like Smog type dragon where they're long or longer.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay. And then 2 legs and wings is like if...
Isn't there a different version for that? What's that called?
A wyvern.
That's it. This has nothing to do with the sea creature.
I'm curious what type of sea creature has no flippers, but still needs wings. I mean, even penguins got flippers.
I don't know. When you said no flippers and has wings, I 100% tried to imagine a snake with wings. And that right there, folks, is nightmares at midnight. I'm saying like flying up in the air. Like just flying through the sky with no legs. Just a snake with wings. And let's even add breathing fire into it, because that just sounds terrifying. Just...
An aquatic, flying, fire-breathing snake.
Yep. And that's why we call this podcast Nightmares at Midnight. Because you just took me there. I really enjoy people messaging me and letting me know that they enjoy you being on the podcast with me. I understand that when it's just me and I'm just given the history, there's not a lot of...
Conversation.
No, not conversation.
Banter.
Banter, that's the word. There's a lot of back and forth banter between the two of us. And I really enjoy having you on my episodes with me. And I enjoy having Violet on my episodes. I haven't had Violet on for a while. Yeah. And I appreciate when I get messages like that because it shows that people enjoy listening to us. And I apologize. This episode got really heavy really fast.
You know, there's not any banter because you never let Patricia talk.
For those of you that remember our earlier episodes, when I used to just say it was just me and Patricia. That's what my husband calls my alter ego, or my other voice in my head. I can't let Patricia out. You tell me I have too much of a temper enough.
Yeah, Patricia's the angry one.
Yes, so thanks for tuning in to this heavier episode of Nightmares at Midnight podcast. And next week, like I said, we'll probably finish up the Sea Creatures series. We will be doing 23 episodes.
Yay, prime numbers.
Yes. So that way my husband's inner math nerd can be satisfied. And then we'll be taking a break and picking back up with season 2. So please make sure you're sharing. I have about 20 people that solid listen every week. And if we can pump up those rookie numbers, that would be great. So if you can share with your friends or listen around your friends so that way they want to start listening too. Don't forget about Patreon. That'll help us out quite a bit too. And we will be bringing back a couple of ads in the episodes. We haven't been doing that for a while. I have a few that I have to update and then bringing them back. Thank you for listening to our episode. We'll
keep it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's the other one.
What?
Keep it weird.
Oh, morbid. But not so weird.
Keep it a little strange? Is that
keep it strange?
Is that too close to copyright infringement?
I feel like it, kind of. So, anyways, wow.
They would love the free shout out. You know it. I'm Kez, and I'm Will.
Any of you out there that know what I'm talking about, you listen to the Morbid podcast, which is true crime, which I have been suggested to do a few true crime episodes, and that's not technically what my podcast is. Could I go there? Yes, because it is my podcast, but will I? Doubtful, because that information is very cut and dry factual. I can't give you my opinion. It's just more cut and dry facts, which a lot of the true crime you guys have heard before, so it's not new content. When I do the mythological stuff, a lot of you guys don't know about specific creatures, or you haven't heard of specific creatures before, or you haven't heard of different cryptids or scary spots. Oh, that reminds me, I forgot to mention, we went to Colorado this last week, and while we were gone, we went to Riverdale Road, which was one of my previous episodes, and I'd like to say I did not die, and I did not see a jogger that tried to attack the car.
No.
And we didn't see people hanging in the trees.
No.
But we did drive the 11-mile stretch of Riverdale Road and live to tell the tale.
It is more populated than I would have thought for as many stories that come off of that road, because there weren't a lot of long stretches with no houses.
Right. It was very, what do they call that, where they're built up with new houses?
Well, like there's several subdivisions along it.
Yep, that's what I was thinking of.
They're what looked like, at least at one point, if not still active, a farm every quarter to half mile.
Like, it was very busy.
Yeah, there wasn't anywhere
secluded?
Yeah, like super secluded, or where I feel like I could stop a car and look right and left, or forward and back as the car is driving down the road and not see a house.
I think the strangest thing on that entire road was when we passed that house and they had like 6 wolf dogs.
Yeah,
Do you remember that?
Yes, we went under that overpass, and the crazy thing is there's that like walking trail park, like just down the road from them. Mm-hmm. So that was a little odd, but
because it threw me off because I was just looking, seeing if I'd find anything spooky, and all of a sudden there's this big old pack of wolf dogs, but they were fenced in.
Yeah.
In somebody's yard, and like there was even signs that were like, "These are our pets." Like,
yeah, just put the package on the other side of the fence and like, don't try to come in the gate.
That was probably about the weirdest thing on that road.
Yeah.
But it was cool to go there and see a spot that I had talked about on the podcast. So, thanks for taking me.
Of course.
Rabbit hole again. Sorry. The hamsters are going 1,000,000 miles an hour up there.
Because you're not letting Patricia drive.
Anything else you want to add?
No, we're good.
Okay. What's the phrase?
Not keep it weird.
Not keep it weird.
Okay.
As always, catch us next time.